I wasn't the one crying at the florist when the peonies came in wrong. I was the one who'd pre-negotiated the contract so that wrong meant it was their problem, not mine. They thought the declined card at the final fitting meant I couldn't afford to help family. What they didn't know was that I could afford anything I wanted. I just couldn't afford to keep paying for people who'd made it clear I wasn't family at all. I was done being the good stepdaughter. This time, they were going to pay for their own dream wedding. Let me back up. My mother remarried when I was 24. His name was Richard, and he came with a daughter, Jessica, who was 3 years younger than me. From day one, Mom made it clear that this was her chance at a real family, the implication being that just the two of us hadn't quite cut it. I was working as an event coordinator at a boutique planning firm in Charleston, making decent money, building a career. Jessica had dropped out of college twice and was finding herself through a series of increasingly expensive hobbies. The comparison started immediately. Jessica has such refined taste, Mom would say, watching her stepdaughter order the most expensive thing on the menu. Claire, you're always so practical. Practical. The word she used when she meant boring, when she meant I didn't matter enough to indulge. I want you to understand something before you ask why I didn't just walk away. Financial abuse doesn't start with someone hitting you up for thousands of dollars. It starts smaller. It starts with, could you grab the check this time? Richard's between jobs. It starts with, Jessica's car insurance is due, and we're a little short this month. It starts with being told that if you really loved your family, you wouldn't keep score. So I didn't keep score. Not out loud, anyway. But I'm an event coordinator. Details are literally my job. I kept receipts. I kept spreadsheets. I told myself it was just to track my own spending, nothing more. Looking back, I think some part of me always knew I'd need them. The first year of their marriage, I probably gave them $6,000. Small amounts, never enough to feel catastrophic. Gas money here, a utility bill there. Just until Richard's consulting gig pays out. The consulting gig never paid out. Year 2, it crept up to $15,000. Jessica's wisdom teeth surgery. New tires for Richard's truck. A small loan for first and last month's rent when they decided to upgrade to a bigger apartment. I never saw a penny back. But I did see Jessica's Instagram. Designer bags. Weekend trips to Savannah. Dinner at restaurants I couldn't afford to eat at myself. When I mentioned this once gently, so gently Mom's face went cold. Jessica works hard at her photography business, she said. Photography business. Jessica had sold exactly 3 prints, all to Richard's mother. Then came the engagement. Jessica met Blake at a gallery opening. He was in finance, came from money, drove a Tesla. They dated for 8 months before he proposed on a yacht. The ring was 4 carats. I know because Jessica FaceTimed me from the boat, squealing, angling her hand so the diamond caught the light. Claire, you have to help me plan the wedding. You're so good at this stuff. My mother called 10 minutes later. Isn't it wonderful? We're thinking next June. Richard and I will handle what we can, but you know how these things are. We'll need your expertise. Expertise. Not help, not even a favor. My expertise. The thing I did for paying clients, I was expected to do for free. I should have said no right then. But you have to understand, I'd spent 24 years trying to earn my mother's approval. This felt like my chance. If I made Jessica's wedding perfect, if I proved I was valuable, maybe finally I'd get a seat at the table. Not literally the kids' table at Thanksgiving, where they still put me at 30. An actual place in this family. So I said yes. The requests started immediately. Jessica wanted a rustic, chic garden wedding at a historic plantation venue. Price tag, $12,000 just for the location. Can you cover the deposit? Mom asked. We'll pay you back from the wedding fund. There was no wedding fund. But I paid the deposit. And then I paid for the florist consultation fee, and the cake tasting, and the invitation designer's retainer. Each time, Mom promised reimbursement. Each time, the money vanished into whatever financial black hole they'd created. I was strategic about it, though. Every vendor I booked was someone I knew personally, someone I'd worked with on corporate events. I negotiated contracts very, very carefully. Payment schedules, cancellation clauses, liability provisions. They thought I was just being thorough, professional. I was building a paper trail. 3 months before the wedding, We went dress shopping. Jessica wanted to go to the most expensive boutique in Charleston, the kind of place where they serve champagne and the cheapest dress is $3,000. I wasn't invited initially. Mom and Jessica were going to make a girls' day of it with Richard's sister and his mother. Then Mom called, "Claire, honey, we need you to come. You have such a good eye, and besides," she paused, "we might need your card." Your card. Not to borrow money, not even for a loan. Your card. Like I was a walking ATM with a convenient human attachment. I went. I smiled. I watched Jessica try on dress after dress, each one more elaborate than the last. She finally chose one, $8,000, not including alterations. When the consultant asked for payment, everyone looked at me. "Claire can cover it," Mom said brightly. "We'll settle up later." I pulled out my card, handed it over, watched the consultant swipe it. The machine beeped. Transaction approved. But here's what they didn't see. I'd called my bank that morning, set up a special alert system. Every purchase over $5,000 would trigger an immediate notification with detailed merchant information. I was documenting everything, time-stamped and geotagged. The dress was just the beginning. Suddenly everything was urgent, essential, couldn't possibly wait. The photographer Jessica wanted was booking up fast. I paid his 50% deposit. The caterer needed menu selections locked in. I covered the tasting fee and the planning retainer. The band, the bartender, the vintage car for photos. On and on. I kept waiting for them to say thank you, or to acknowledge that I was paying for literally everything. Instead, I got criticism. "Claire, the invitation font looks cheap. Can you find something with more character? These centerpieces aren't very elegant. Didn't you say you were good at this?" I showed the bridesmaid dress options to my friends, and they said you have no taste. Can we start over? I wasn't a bridesmaid, by the way. Jessica's bridal party was 6 girls' college friends who'd apparently been there for all the important moments of her life. I was the help, the unpaid planner, the bank. A month before the wedding, we had the final vendor meeting. 11 people crammed into Mom and Richard's living room, going over last-minute details. I'd prepared a master spreadsheet, every expense, every payment schedule, every outstanding balance. "So, here's where we stand," I said, pulling up the document on my laptop. "Total costs are running about $75,000. I've paid approximately $62,000 so far. The remaining $13,000 is due in installments over the next 4 weeks." Silence. Then Richard laughed. Actually laughed. $62,000? Claire, don't be dramatic. We've pitched in plenty. I stared at him. I have receipts for every transaction. Well, you live with your mother rent-free whenever you visit. That's worth something. I visited twice a year, for 3 days each time. And we always include you in family dinners? Mom added. That has value too. Jessica, scrolling through her phone, barely looked up. Plus you're getting, amazing portfolio pieces from this. Lots of photographers and planners would pay to work on a wedding this nice. I should have walked out. Should have sent them my invoice and blocked their numbers. But I didn't. You know why? Because I'm an event coordinator. And event coordinators finish what they start. We see projects through to completion, even when the clients are nightmare people who deserve to plan their own disasters. Also, I had a plan. 2 weeks before the wedding, Mom called about the final fitting for Jessica's dress. "We need you there," she said. "They're making some adjustments, and the last payment is due." The last payment on the dress was $2,500. I knew because I'd read the contract very carefully when I'd signed it. Signed it in my name, with my credit card, under terms that made me the financial guarantor. I showed up at the boutique. Jessica was already there, glowing, holding court with her bridesmaids. They'd made it a party, champagne, pastries, a photographer to capture behind-the-scenes moments. None of them had paid for any of it. The consultant brought out the dress. It was beautiful. I'll give Jessica that. She'd chosen well. The alterations were perfect. She looked like a bride from a magazine. "Okay," the consultant said to me. "Are you ready to settle the final balance?" I handed her my credit card, the same one I'd been using all along. She ran it, waited. The machine beeped. Declined. Everyone froze. The consultant tried again. Declined. A third time. Declined. I'm sorry," the consultant said, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "Do you have another form of payment?" "What's wrong with it?" Mom demanded, turning to me. Not asking if I was okay, if there was a mistake, demanding to know why my card wasn't working. I must have hit my limit, I said calmly. I've been putting a lot of wedding expenses on it. Jessica's face went red. Are you serious right now? Today? You couldn't have checked before? I'm sorry, I said. I didn't realize I was so close to maxing it out. Do you have another card we can use? The silence was deafening. We don't have $2,500 just sitting around, Richard finally said. That's why you were handling it. Well, the consultant said carefully, the dress is ready for pickup, but we can't release it without payment. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Real ones, I think. This is my wedding dress. The wedding is in 2 weeks. Claire, fix this. I don't have another card with that kind of limit available right now, I said. It was true. I'd moved my money around very carefully that morning. Mom grabbed my arm, hard enough to hurt. Claire, stop playing games. We need this dress. Jessica needs this dress. You're being selfish. I'm not trying to be difficult. I just don't have access to that much money right this second. Then get it, Richard said. His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Call your bank. Take out a loan. Do whatever you have to do. We are not leaving here without that dress. I let them panic for another 10 minutes. Watched Jessica cry. Watched her bridesmaids comfort her, shooting daggers at me like I'd personally ruined her life. Watched Mom's face cycle through anger and desperation and something that looked almost like hatred. Finally, I said, I can call my bank and see about a temporary credit increase. Give me a few minutes. I stepped outside, made a fake phone call to nobody, came back in. Okay, I said. They approved an increase. Let's try again. I handed over my card. This time, I'd removed the block. The charge went through. Jessica hugged the dress bag like it was her firstborn child. Nobody hugged me. Nobody even said thank you. In the parking lot, Mom caught up to me. That was unacceptable, Claire. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. I didn't mean to. I've just been covering so many expenses. Then maybe you should have budgeted better. This wedding is important. Jessica is family. I need you to step up. I drove home and added the dress-fitting incident to my spreadsheet. Time, date, witnesses present, emotional damages. I was building something. They just couldn't see it yet. The week before the wedding, everything accelerated. Last-minute crises, real and imagined. The florist needed an additional $1,200 for extra arrangements. The caterer discovered that 3 guests had severe allergies and needed custom meals $800. Jessica decided she absolutely needed a professional makeup artist for the bridal party $2,000. Every request came through Mom, every payment came from me, and every transaction was meticulously documented. The day before the wedding, we had the rehearsal dinner. Richard's family had offered to host it at a nice restaurant downtown. Open bar, prefix menu, the whole thing. I showed up in a simple navy dress, ready to fade into the background. They'd made a seating chart. I found my name card at a table in the back corner, near the kitchen doors, next to Jessica's college roommate's boyfriend, who I'd never met. Mom and Richard sat at the head table with Jessica and Blake, the important people. I sat down, smiled, made small talk with the stranger next to me who clearly didn't want to be there either. Halfway through dinner, Richard stood up to make a toast. He talked about how proud he was of Jessica, how beautiful she'd grown into, how lucky Blake was to marry such an amazing woman. He thanked Mom for being such a wonderful mother and co-planner. He thanked his family for their support. He didn't mention me once. Neither did Jessica in her speech. Neither did Mom. $75,000. And I didn't even make the acknowledgments. I went home that night and made one final phone call. To my lawyer. A guy I'd worked with on several corporate events. Someone who specialized in contract law and financial disputes. I need to know, I said, if I'm legally obligated to continue paying for any of this. He asked me to send him all my documentation. Receipts, contracts, emails, text messages, everything. He called back an hour later. Claire, you're not going to believe this. Almost every single contract you signed has you listed as the responsible party, not your mother or Richard. You're not a co-signer. You're the primary client, which means legally they have zero obligation to pay you back unless you have written agreements stating otherwise. My stomach dropped. So I'm screwed? Not exactly. You signed these contracts, yes. But here's the interesting part, you also negotiated payment plans for most vendors, and those payment plans extend beyond the wedding date. The final installments aren't due until September. The wedding was in June. What does that mean? I asked. It means you can transfer financial responsibility. With the right documentation and vendor cooperation, you can reassign these contracts to different parties. It's complicated, but possible, especially if the vendors are people you have professional relationships with. They are, all of them. Then we have options. The wedding day was perfect. Sunny, 78 degrees, light breeze. The venue looked exactly like the Pinterest board Jessica had shared with me 9 months ago. White roses, vintage lanterns, gauzy fabric draped over everything. It was beautiful. I wasn't a bridesmaid, remember? So I arrived as a guest. Sat in the middle section. Not family, not friend. Just there. Jessica looked stunning. The dress, the hair, the makeup, everything I'd paid for, displayed perfectly. Blake looked happy. Nervous, but happy. Mom cried during the ceremony. Real tears, streaming down her face. She was getting everything she'd wanted. The perfect family, the perfect wedding, the perfect daughter. Finally, just not me. At the reception, they seated me at table 14, near the back, with second cousins I'd never met, and Blake's co-workers who spent the entire dinner talking about quarterly projections. I ate my $75 per plate meal that I'd technically paid for, drank my wine, smiled when I was supposed to smile. During the toasts, Jessica's maid of honor talked about how Jessica had done all of this herself and pulled off a miracle on a budget. People applauded. Jessica beamed. I took out my phone and sent a single email to my lawyer. Do it. See, here's what they didn't know. Those payment plans I'd negotiated, they were all structured the same way. Initial deposits due immediately, balance due in installments starting 60 days after the event. And every single contract had a clause about reassigning financial responsibility if the original signer became unable to pay. My lawyer had spent the past week contacting every vendor, explaining that I was withdrawing from financial responsibility due to unforeseen circumstances, providing documentation that Mom and Richard had claimed to be co-planners and had promised reimbursement, showing emails where they'd made decisions about vendors and services. The vendors didn't care who paid. They just wanted their money. And my lawyer had helpfully provided them with new billing information. Mom and Richard's names, address, phone number. Every single vendor agreed. Some reluctantly, some immediately. But by the end of the week before the wedding, I wasn't the client anymore. Mom and Richard were. The first invoice hit their mailbox 4 days after the wedding. From the venue, $18,000, due in 30 days. Mom called me, confused. Claire, honey, there's been some mistake. We got a bill for the venue, but you paid that already, right? I paid the deposit. The balance was due in installments, but you were handling that. I was, but I couldn't anymore. I hit my credit limit, remember? So I had to reassign the contracts. Silence. Then, what do you mean reassign? I mean the vendors need to be paid, and since I'm not able to continue making payments, they're now billing the responsible parties. You and Richard planned this wedding. You made the decisions. The vendors are just following up with you directly now. Claire, you can't just, we don't have $18,000. I didn't have it either, Mom. But I found a way. I'm sure you will too. She hung up. 3 hours later, Richard called. Much less friendly. What the hell did you do? I removed myself from financial responsibility for a wedding I was never actually part of. All the contracts are transferable with proper documentation. My lawyer handled it. Your lawyer? Jesus Christ, Claire, this is family. Funny. I didn't feel like family when I was sitting by the kitchen at the rehearsal dinner, or when nobody thanked me in any of the speeches, or when Jessica's maid of honor said she'd done it all herself. You're being vindictive. I'm being practical. You've told me my whole life how practical I am. Over the next 2 weeks, the invoices kept coming. Florist, $9,000. Caterer, $22,000. Photographer, $8,000. Band, $6,000. On and on. They tried to fight it, claimed they'd never agreed to be financially responsible, but the contracts were clear, and my lawyer had made sure every reassignment was airtight. The vendors had emails from Mom and Richard making decisions, approving choices, signing off on details. They'd acted as clients. Now they were being billed as clients. Jessica called me, sobbing. Blake's family is going to think we're scammers. We're getting collection notices. This is ruining our marriage. I'm sorry you're going through that, I said. And I meant it. I didn't hate Jessica. I just didn't think her wedding was worth destroying my financial future for. Can't you fix this, please? I'll pay you back, I swear. With what money, Jessica? You don't have a job. She hung up. Mom tried one more approach. Guilt. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, stood in my doorway with red eyes and trembling hands. How could you do this to me? I'm your mother. You're right, I said. You're my mother. And for 30 years, I've tried to be the daughter you wanted. I gave you money. I gave you my time. I gave you my expertise. I planned a $75,000 wedding and didn't even get a seat at the family table. So yes, I'm your mother. But Claire, when did you become mine? She didn't have an answer. The last I heard, they'd taken out a second mortgage on the apartment they'd just upgraded to. They'll be paying off Jessica's wedding for the next 5 years. Blake's family helps where they can, but there's tension there now. Jessica's Instagram has gone quiet, no more designer bags, no more expensive restaurants. As for me, I'm doing fine. Better than fine, actually. I got a promotion at work. Started seeing someone who thinks it's weird that I was never invited to family holidays. I'm learning what healthy relationships look like. Sometimes I think about that moment at the dress fitting, the card declining, everyone's faces. They thought I was broke, helpless, at their mercy. They had no idea I'd spent 9 months building a case, that every payment I'd made was documented, every conversation recorded, in a one-party consent state, perfectly legal, every contract negotiated with exit clauses. They thought the declined card meant I'd hit my limit. They were right, just not the way they thought. I'd hit my limit of being treated like an ATM, of being loved conditionally, of earning my place at a table I was never going to be allowed to sit at. The bill they're paying now isn't from me. It's from every vendor they thought I'd just handle forever. It's from the life they built on my money without ever saying thank you. And you know what? I sleep better now than I have in years. I'm not the broke one buried in wedding debt. I'm the one who learned that family isn't about blood or marriage certificates. It's about who shows up for you, who values you, who makes room for you at the table. I found my people. They just weren't the ones I was born to. And that's okay. Some families you're born into. Some you build. Mine is still under construction, but at least this time, I'm not the only one paying for it.